to,
I think it's helpful to see
our goal is to educate, empower, and develop the next generation of next leaders of liberty. And today we have a couple of special guests. They are my favorite libertarian power couple. And the thing about webinars, the thing about Zoom webinars is that you can fulfill your dreams. You can make a really great project because you have virtually no boundaries when it comes to inviting people and being in the marketplace of ideas, of activists. We all are trying to sell the ideas of liberty. And no one sells the ideas of liberty better than Matt and Terry Kibbe. Matt and Terry Kibbe are the co-founders, the president and the CEO of Free the People, a organization which does something very similar to Students for Liberty. They are promoting the ideas of libertarianism through pop culture, through video storytelling, through social media. And they have been very often the guests of events of SFL. They are our great friends. And it would be a shame and it would be a mistake not to have Matt and Terry Kibbe in a libertarian video series if you can. So please welcome Matt and Terry Kibbe.
Thanks, Adam. That was a very generous introduction of us. So, hello, everyone. Here we are, still locked down in Washington, D.C. They've started to open up the city a little bit, but the restrictions are still pretty high. I am looking forward to the opportunity to go outside to an actual bar or restaurant and have someone serve me a meal. And we're both getting tired of cooking and doing dishes every day. So the title of our talk...
Honestly, she's getting kind of tired of hanging out with me all the time. That's what she's really saying.
Well, I wasn't going to say that. I'm excited. Our barbershops and beauty salons are opening up, so I get to get my hair cut by a real person. Matt actually allowed me to cut his hair twice during this lockdown.
That's why I'm wearing a hat, by the way.
Yeah, that was a true test of our marriage. So the title of our talk that we do is generally called Love, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness. And we talk about our lives and tell personal stories and always tie them back to the libertarian ideals that have really shaped everything that we've done throughout our life. But given what we're going through these days, the title of our talk is slightly different. It's now called Love in the Time of COVID. We'll still be telling stories, but we are going to be sharing videos with you all that tie back actually to everything that we've done in our life. But what makes these videos interesting is that they are videos that we've done, that our team has done since the lockdown started. So these are all fairly new. We switched all of our work here at Free the People to focusing on COVID when we all got shut down. So that's the introduction. Do you have anything to say?
Just that in a weird way, and it gets back to what you were saying about being able to get guests to travel to Germany in a way that was impossible back when we were buying plane tickets and financing all that stuff. This period of government mandates and lockdowns and all sorts of top-down decisions that governors and presidents and faceless bureaucrats have made in our country, and I think across the globe, it has been an insanely productive period for our little team of artists and videographers. And I counted up the production the other day. I think we've made like 35 videos and published almost as many articles at the same time. And there's like 5 of us that produce that sort of content. So lockdowns have one advantage, because you really don't have anything else to do except work and drink, maybe sleep, and then work again. So in a weird way, it's been productive, but it's also been very important and I think threatening time for those of us that believe in liberty. And we'll talk about that a little bit.
One more comment about the team, and then we'll actually get into the meat of the presentation, is all of our team is scattered across the US. Matt and I are here in DC. We've got people in Virginia, New York, Pennsylvania, Illinois, California, West Virginia. So everything that we do is remote to start with, and we just do a lot of phone calls. But when the lockdown started, we kind of recognized that people were feeling disjointed and needed a little bit more connection. So we started doing our staff calls and everything via Skype. So I actually see our team more now than we did before, which I think is good. I'm not sure they enjoy having as much FaceTime with us, but
no, we're starting to like each other. It's unusual that libertarians would actually start to connect as human beings. So we're experimenting with that.
All right. So Matt and I have been married forever, probably longer than most people have been born alive on this call. We got married in 1986, but we actually started dating in 1983. We met in the fall of 82, but actually started dating in 83. And people always ask us about how we met. And because we've been married together, for so long, and we still, for the most part, like each other, everybody just assumes that it was, love at first sight. We saw each other from across the room. The harps started playing, the swans were singing. I don't know. But it was not that at all. It was at the end of the school year, and there was a spring formal happening. And Matt was trying to find a date to his spring formal. And he asked out 3 girls before me, or just 2?
3.
No, it was 3. He asked out 3 girls and they all said no. So he went old school and asked somebody what my last name was. He had met me once or twice, looked me up in the phone book. You guys probably don't even know what a phone book is anymore. And called me, left a message, just that he wanted to talk to me. And he was not very specific. So I kind of knew why he was calling, that he was looking for a date. I also knew that there was another guy from a different fraternity who was also about to ask me out to his fraternity's formal. So I was now faced with a choice of people to go out on this fairly fancy evening. It tends to be an overnight party, that sort of thing. And I didn't know either of them that well. The other guy, I didn't know him. I didn't know the guys in his fraternity. I didn't know the girls in his sorority. So my thinking was, if I went out with him and he turned out to be a jerk, I would be stuck and I would have a miserable time because I wouldn't have anyone to talk to. I wouldn't have anybody to have a drink with or anything. So that brought me back to Matt. I didn't know at this point that I was his third choice. Again, I didn't know him very well. He had a mullet, long hair. He was always quoting Hayek and Mises, and kind of an odd dude. But the benefit that he had over the other guy was that I knew his fraternity. I hung out with them a lot. I might have gone out on a date or 2 with a few of his brothers prior to this. But a lot of my friends dated the guys in his fraternity. So my rationale for choosing him was that if he turned out to be a jerk, I could still party and have a good time because it would just be a party with my friends and I could just ignore him. So that was the very, very romantic start to our relationship. I was his third choice and he was the lesser of 2 evils in my book. And here we are. Well, that was 83. So a long time later, we're still hanging out.
She still introduces me as her first husband. So incentives matter a lot. And in my defense, I was already a libertarian when I went to college. I was a libertarian in high school. I actually discovered Ayn Rand in the liner notes of a Rush album, 2112, dedicated to the genius of Ayn Rand. And I followed those breadcrumbs and accidentally stumbled across Anthem and started devouring all of Ayn Rand's novels when I was still in high school. I read The Fountainhead, which is my favorite book by Ayn Rand, when I was 15 years old. And she, of course, eventually says in her nonfiction works that if you want to understand economics, you should read the Austrian economists, and specifically Ludwig von Mises. So I found a copy of Human Action, and I was even reading Adam Smith, and
I said he was kind of weird. I mean, he was doing this at like 16 and 17, well before I met him.
So I am a stereotypical awkward guy libertarian, because I was spending all my time reading books, and it's kind of a chicken and an egg, because maybe I was reading so many books because I couldn't get a single girl to say yes to a date, or maybe I couldn't get a date because all I would talk about when I was near a girl was like the non-aggression principle, or some sort of crazy stuff that maybe some of you can relate to on all of this.
You know, there are times when I look back and I'm like, what on earth was I thinking?
I don't think you were thinking. And I think, not that I'm encouraging alcohol abuse, but I feel like a little bit of drinking helped me look more normal through Terry's beer goggles.
This is true. So we started dating, this formal was at the end of May of 1983. And then that summer, we actually got pretty serious pretty quickly. And that Christmas, I didn't realize it, but there was a test, because the present that Matt gave me for our first Christmas together, which is kind of important, right? Kind of symbolic. Yeah, he gave me a copy of the Fountainhead. I think he was checking out to make sure I would read it and still talk to him afterwards. And I guess it's a good thing that it worked out.
You wanted jewelry.
I did want jewelry.
So the Fountainhead, I don't know if you guys have ever read any Ayn Rand. A lot of people cite Atlas Shrugged as a book, particularly people of my generation. Ayn Rand was the gateway for the ideas of liberty. And it's important to note that she was a novelist and a screenwriter from Hollywood. She wasn't an academic, and she wasn't an economist. She was a storyteller. And it was her stories that very much animated my sense of understanding of liberty. And the guy that I've always related to is Howard Rourke. And I think that was probably a huge liability when I was in high school and college. He's kind of a difficult character. He's stubborn. He's principled. He has a specific idea about what he wants to do as an architect. But once I actually found a girl that would talk to me, and I held on to her, and she appears to still be here.
This is actually an avatar.
Having Howard Rourke as sort of my spirit animal has been incredibly helpful, guiding me through life. We're here in Washington, D.C. We're libertarians living in the belly of the beast. And Howard Rourke, particularly when things get tough, and the lockdowns were tough, and the Wall Street bailouts were tough, and there are times when everybody abandons their principles for some sense of security, and we're going through that right now. I'm always able to go back and ask myself, what would Howard Rourke do?
So I am going to attempt to do a screen share here and share with you all the first video that we're going to show today. It is, in fact, What Would Howard Rourke Do? This was produced, and we aired it in honor of the 77th publication of the Fountainhead. So let's see how this works for you all.
What would Howard Rourke do? This year marks the 77th anniversary of the publication of The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. I first read this epic tale about the architect Howard Rourke when I was just 15. Rourke's quest to achieve something worthwhile with his life left an indelible impression on me. Like all of Ayn Rand's novels, there is something eerily familiar and modern about Howard Rourke's struggle, and plenty of lessons if you're looking. Here's some that helped guide me through life, particularly when things got tough. Lesson 1, if you don't fight for your dreams, no one else is going to care. In the opening chapter of the book, Rourke quits an elite university because formal education for him has nothing to offer but stifling conformity. Everybody marches to the same tune, and dissent is, well, frowned upon. Sound familiar? On his way out the door, the dean asks him if he really thinks he can succeed in life as an architect with such an uncompromising artistic vision. Who will let you? He asks, incredulous. That's not the point, Work responds. The point is, who will stop me? Lesson 2, seeking the approval of others is no substitute for knowing what you want. One of my favorite passages in the Fountainhead is one that I taped to my dorm room door in college. It's a particular exchange with Peter Keating, a fellow aspiring architect, who, though really good looking and popular among his classmates, lacks any sense of personal dignity and self-respect. He is deeply envious of Rourke's artistic vision and willingness to buck the system. Still, craving Rourke's approval, Peter asks for career advice. If you want my advice, Rourke responds, you've made a mistake already. By asking me, by asking anyone, don't you know what you want? How can you stand it not to know? Now, I definitely didn't know what I wanted to do with my life when I was in school, but I looked at that quote every day, every time I opened that door, knowing that the burden was on me and me alone to figure it out. Lesson 3, do the work you love. I love working. I've never really understood those who think that work is a 4-letter word, something to be endured. And I've always tried to find work that is personally satisfying. Sometimes it's not. It's just a job, a grind. So you have to walk away to find the next better thing. I learned this attitude from Howard Rourke. In that same conversation with the snooty university dean in the first chapter of the Fountainhead, Rourke says, I have, let's say, 60 years to live. Most of that time will be spent working. I've chosen the work I want to do. If I find no joy in it, then I'm only condemning myself to 60 years of torture. And I can find the joy only if I do my work in the best way possible to me. But the best is a matter of standards, and I set my own standards. Lesson 4, being an innovator won't necessarily make you cool. Howard Rourke's speech to the jury is one of the greatest offenses of creative integrity and disruptive entrepreneurship that I have ever come across. But it comes with a warning. Throughout the centuries, Rourke tells the jurors, there were men who took first steps down new roads armed with nothing but their own vision. Their goals differed, but they all had this in common, that the step was first, the road new, the vision unborrowed, and the response they received, hatred. The great creators, the thinkers, the artists, the scientists, the inventors, stood alone against the men of their time. Every great new thought was opposed. Every great new invention was denounced. But the men of unborrowed vision went ahead. They fought, they suffered, and they paid. But they won. So you may have to make a choice someday between being cool and popular or doing the thing that really matters to you. It's okay to take your own path. Lesson 5, learn how to say no. Howard Rourke taught me how to say no. Negotiating the day-to-day give and take in life is all about cooperation, looking for a way to say yes. Sometimes to move forward, you have to split the difference. Which movie are we seeing tonight? What's the final price on that used car? Who's taking the lead on a work project? Most of the time, on most decisions, we don't get exactly what we want, and that's okay. But some core values cannot be compromised away. Sometimes, on the things that really matter, you have to learn how to say no. Here's how Howard Rourke tries to explain it to Peter Keating. To sell your soul is the easiest thing in the world. That's what everybody does every hour of his life. If I asked you to keep your soul, would you understand why that's much harder? This lesson has served as a kind of intellectual armor for me, living and working in Washington, D.C. for my entire career. In this town, your soul is a medium of exchange, and it's a seller's market. You could get a good price, and it would be easy. Say no. Lesson 6, never disappoint your 16-year-old self. One of my real-life heroes is Neil Peart, the philosopher king and drummer for the band Rush. He is the one who dedicated their album 2112 to the genius of Ayn Rand. If you watch the recent documentary of the band's final tour, Time Stands Still, you can get a sense for who he was. Struggling at that point to perform the insanely muscular and complex drum parts that made him one of the greatest drummers in the history of rock. But he does it.
Okay.
Eventually, playing through the tour with bloody hands and feet, simply because he made the commitment to himself, to his bandmates, to his fans. Like me, he discovered Howard work in the Fountainhead when he was in high school, and it provided him with a few moral guideposts and a roadmap for a life well lived. It's about being your own hero, he told Rolling Stone. I set out to never betray the values that 16-year-old had, to never sell out, to never bow to the man. A compromise is what I can never accept. Howard Work's struggle to create something beautiful taught me to believe in myself. I've tried as best I can to never betray the idealism of my youth. So what would Howard Work do? Don't ask me. Don't ask anyone. Read the book for your own self and figure it out. No one is going to do it for you.
So yeah, I married that guy.
Sorry.
So yeah, I did actually marry Howard Rourke in a weird way, but that's okay. It's worked out for us. We, like I said, started dating in 1983, got married in 1986. We've been through a lot. One of the things that we used to do for fun back when concerts were legal was that we would travel the country to see the Grateful Dead. We probably saw them about 100 times. We never saw them in Europe, unfortunately.
Tragically.
At the time, I don't think we had the money to travel to Europe. But anyway, it was a very important part of our lives. It was a great excuse to go someplace for a vacation. I might have chosen the beach. Matt always chose Grateful Dead concerts. Every once in a while, they played near the beach, so we were both happy. But what we liked about the Dead, not just the music, I mean, that was cool, but the scene itself for the Grateful Dead was amazing. The parking lot of a Grateful Dead concert is the perfect example of spontaneous order and community. And you would, people were so kind and giving and would just always help you out. You could buy pretty much whatever you wanted. And I do mean whatever you wanted. One of my favorite stories about a Grateful Dead show, we were in Ohio with my sister at Buckeye Lake, which was a great venue. It was just a farm and the guy would hold a couple concerts every year. And at the end of the show, we were walking through the parking lot, actually back to the lake where my sister's boat was docked to head home. And we passed a guy that had a t-shirt that was the classic skeleton steal your face symbol. It's a skull with it, and they would have a picture inside. And this one had an emblem of the Pittsburgh Penguins, which is my hometown hockey team. And I loved the shirt. And I was like, dude, can I buy one? And he said, no, I'm sold out. I was like, oh, that's a total bummer, dude. He's like, but I could print some more. So I was like, all right. So I handed this guy my business card and $100 and told him to send us a couple shirts. And the next morning I woke up and I thought about what I had done. And I was like, yeah, I'm not sure that was the best decision I've ever made with $100. But lo and behold, a couple weeks later, the t-shirts arrived. It's just an amazing example, I think, of the community that surrounds the Grateful Dead.
So that metaphor, that sense of trust could come right out of Adam Smith and the theory of moral sentiments, but that vendor had a sense of belonging to a community, and we were all part of that community, and we were protective of the brand, we were protective of the members of the community, and that was the basis by which peaceful cooperation could happen. So I always viewed a Grateful Dead parking lot as a metaphor for how it is that we get along in civil society. And it's relevant today because most of us, I think, certainly in the United States, and I think in most countries, we've been essentially locked down for the last three and a half months. I don't even know anymore. don't know
Because
what day it
billion
is.
years, maybe.
I don't know what time it is. I'm not even sure I'm wearing pants right now, but I do know that I've been locked in my house for a long time, based on a very authoritarian idea that we should all shelter in place is the euphemistic way of saying this. And if you're reading Twitter right now, you know that the United States is essentially on fire. And I think there's a relationship between the fact that we've locked down everybody. Everybody's been isolated. 40 million Americans are out of work right now. And now we're fighting. And there was a spark, a horrific spark that has started this thing. And I worry about this in the context of whether or not we will be able to sort of rebuild that sense of community that we had. And in the midst of all this, I made a video about my favorite band that has a lesson, I hope, in the times of COVID.
All right, we're going to attempt to show you this video again. 2 for 2.
I'll go really fast here.
Everybody do
Yeah,
what you
just
want to
tie
do. It's December 21st, 1968, and Bob Weir is egging on rowdy fans from the stage of the iconic Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles, California. For the Grateful Dead, a band beyond description, the music never stopped. Between September 1968 and December 1969, the Dead would play 177 concerts in the United States. It's hard to imagine today, but this deal goes down in the midst of a global pandemic that would kill an estimated 1 million people. The Hong Kong flu of 1968 was carried to the United States by soldiers returning to California from the Vietnam War. San Francisco was ground zero. And still, from the start of the outbreak through the end of May 1969, the Grateful Dead would play 47 shows in their hometown. The Grateful Dead were hardly alone. The Rolling Stones, at the height of their powers, launched an American tour on November 7th, 1969, playing 29 shows in 16 cities. Led Zeppelin launched their conquest of the United States on December 26, 1968, actually playing 4 nights in San Francisco that January. Even the Beatles played their final live show, albeit from a socially distant rooftop in London. Woodstock, the most important cultural event of the peace and love generation, rolled on smack in the middle of it. What a long, strange trip it's been since those heady days. On April 21st, 2020, my beloved Dead & Company, featuring the surviving members of the Grateful Dead, canceled their entire summer tour due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Bandleader Bob Weir, in an abundance of caution, has also canceled all dates for his other touring band, Wolf Brothers. Fish and a host of other bands have followed suit. One can hardly blame musicians for these decisions, given the frenzy of fear coming from the media and governors, and well, just about everyone. The governor of California, Gavin Newsom, has pronounced
the prospect of mass gatherings is negligible at best until we get to herd immunity and we get to a vaccine.
No concerts, no ball games, no art festivals, no conventions, all waiting for the promised safety that may never come. It's difficult to imagine how any of this turns out well. The collapse of live concerts in 2020 could wipe out almost $9 billion if these quarantines don't lift by the end of the year. Lost livelihoods and emotional isolation exact a human toll. The Wellbeing Trust has attempted to tally these deaths of despair, pointing to rampant unemployment, isolation, and an uncertain future. Conditions that could lead to 75,000 deaths from drug or alcohol abuse or suicide. Live music is a wonderful escape, even therapy for some, and nothing's going to bring it back. Is it smart or healthy to keep living in fear? As founding Deadhead Ben Franklin once observed, purportedly right after experiencing an epic 23-minute Dark Star Jam at the Fillmore, those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Jerry Garcia, a founding father in his own right, said it slightly different. You and me bound to spend some time wondering what to choose. It costs a lot to win and even more to lose. After COVID-19, there will surely be another impending threat for politicians and the media to latch onto, something to drive panicked votes and clicks. One way or another, this darkness got to give.
Ben
Okay.
Franklin was a deadhead?
Yeah, I broke news. People didn't know that Ben Franklin was a deadhead, but it's absolutely true because I just saw it on a Zoom call. Bonus points and a free T-shirt to the first person in the chat that figures out how many Grateful Dead Easter eggs and how many subversive references to weed were in that video. Ready? Go. We lost you. There you go.
Well, I was waiting for somebody to just throw out a crazy number. 11, it's close. Anyway, so life when you're married isn't all just awesomeness and Grateful Dead concerts and talking about philosophy and listening to your husband quote Dead Economist to you. Sometimes bad things happen. And in our case, Matt was diagnosed with cancer in 2002. It wasn't just any cancer. It was stage 4. We're going to operate on you in 2 months, but you really need to take this time to get your shit together and write your will. It was pretty awful. Luckily, you can see he survived. Spoiler.
I didn't die.
He's stubborn enough that he was able to beat stage 4 cancer. And this is a story that he didn't like to tell for the longest time. And I understand. I mean, it was a dark time in our lives. There's a lot of reasons not to talk about something so personal, but it's an important story to tell because of the fact that he survived. And he survived in spite of the FDA. I mean, we were lucky that the drugs that saved his life had been approved by the FDA, but only about 20 years prior to his diagnosis. And the one drug that was actually the most critical for his survival took 20 years for the FDA to approve it. So imagine being given a diagnosis and being told, well, there's this drug out there, but we really can't give it to you yet because the government hasn't told you that you can. So we use this story to talk about FDA reform because let's face it, FDA reform is kind of boring, but it's all about telling a personal story to get people to pay attention.
Yeah, literally technology and innovation and some lonely creator that I'll never even know who it was came up with the therapy that would save my life. And it turned a cancer that would have been almost 100% death sentence into a cancer that obviously is 100% survivable in my case. And I don't think people necessarily appreciate the role that innovation, but also choice, doctors and patients deciding what to do. When I finally went to the doctor and I said, "What's that?" It was a huge abdomen in my, a huge tumor in my abdomen. And I pointed at it. I said, "What's that?" Because I'd been to doctors and no one could figure out what was wrong with me. I was immediately shepherded in to treatment and x-rays and all that stuff. And I look at it in the modern context of where we are today. Cancer is 10 times the killer that COVID is. It is the #2 cause of death in the world. It's a deadly disease. It'll kill your family. It's going to kill somebody you love. And I'm looking at all of this data coming out of our country, and I think in other countries as well, where cancer patients are foregoing treatment. Other types of patients are foregoing treatments because of decisions that the government has made about hospitals.
The NIH in the UK stopped all cancer screenings for 3 months. In some cases, that's a death sentence to people.
So yes, I made a video about this, and I made it personal because I want people to understand that things that sound good when the government says them can in fact be deadly.
You and I are doing our very best to flatten the curve because we understand that overwhelmed hospitals cannot treat critical COVID patients effectively, putting more lives at risk. Nobody wants that. But are hospital resources really being used as efficiently as they could be? Are other patients who are facing life-threatening conditions being pushed aside? Who should decide how doctors and hospitals allocate critical health services? We've all been told about warlike conditions and overwhelmed critical care providers in New York State, but hospitals in Syracuse are reporting hundreds of empty beds, even as those in Manhattan are overwhelmed. And although it's easy to find photos of empty hospitals on Twitter, the mainstream media seems solely focused on the worst cases. Any reporting of empty hospital beds is dismissed as irresponsible conspiracy theory. But what's really going on here? The fact is, both narratives are true at the same time. Some hospitals are overwhelmed, as others sit empty. Why? Because well-meaning but dangerously misguided one-size-fits-all directives are creating huge disruptions in the provision of needed care. To prepare for the potential crush of corona cases, some governors across the country have ordered hospitals to put a stop to all elective procedures. Is that a smart policy? Who decides what medical procedures are elective? Does pushing off so deemed elective procedures put patients at greater risk of becoming critical next week? How would a governor or any politician know such things? In West Virginia, the Charleston Area Medical Center has empty beds and many patients are being forced to forego needed care. How are both of these things true at the same time? The president of the West Virginia Hospital Association explains why. The Surgeon General said cancel elective surgeries and you cancel electives. You cancel other related ancillary services and the revenue stream dries up. As an unintended consequence of a well-meaning directive from Washington, D.C., the resources needed to maintain hospital capacity for emergencies are disappearing in West Virginia and other states. In fairness, there's a kernel of truth in these sweeping directives. You don't want healthy people unnecessarily visiting hospitals for vanity procedures, where the chance of catching or spreading infection is very real. But is your chemotherapy treatment really elective? In Georgia, the governor has ordered cancer patients to stay home and avoid their regular treatments for fear that they might contract the virus with a compromised immune system. This one is personal for me. I successfully beat stage 4 cancer in 2002, so I understand the risks associated with exposure to all sorts of things while your body is immune suppressed. Life-saving treatments like chemotherapy and radiation leave patients particularly exposed. But cancer can still kill you even if a virus doesn't. And some people need regular treatments to survive. Foregoing treatments will make beatable cancers less curable later, maybe even deadly. I, for one, would not be alive today if I had foregone treatment. So this is a tough call. But the question, again, is who is best situated? Who has the best knowledge? Who can make the safest call for each patient facing specific circumstances and conditions? Our medical system is a complicated ecosystem. It consists of millions of interacting parts, economies, technologies, products and services, and of course, millions of people helping people in need. How can we ensure that the best decisions are made? First, we have to acknowledge that there is no simple cookie-cutter answer and no single silver bullet solution that can be dictated from the top down. These are complex questions requiring individual answers based on the best local knowledge. Patients should be making decisions in consultation with their doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals. In these times of extraordinary stress on healthcare services, the system will work best when we allow people with the best information, the freedom and responsibility to make decisions locally, along with the freedom to respond to changing conditions on the ground. Directives from on high, however well-meaning, might very well get people killed.
Hey, that worked.
I'm 3 for 3 so far on this screen share. I'm kind of waiting for something horrible to happen.
Never.
So, I mean, I said this before, that's a tough story for us to tell. I still a lot of times start to cry a bit when we talk about it or when I see some of the videos that we've done on it. But we think that telling stories is truly the only way that you can reach people and change your minds. And that's been the driving force behind everything that we've done and do and continue to do at Free the People. I mean, we've taken our personal stories and tied them into what's happening today. I mentioned before the call actually started that 2 weeks ago, Matt was so tired of the lockdown that he desperately needed freedom, and he broke quarantine and drove 16 hours to Iowa to get a beer, going to one of the few places in the country where it was open and he could sit outside and have a cheeseburger and drink a beer and experience freedom again, which was a frightening thing to say. But we tell stories. It's what drives us every day to what we do. And it goes back to what our favorite socialist congresswoman from New York says. It's better to be morally right than to be factually correct. Unfortunately, I think people on our side tend to focus on facts and figures and forget the things that will get people's attention. It's a story, it's a personal story. People can think that what the FDA is doing is great and that you need 20 years of testing to make sure that a drug is safe. And you can make that argument, but a better argument is always made when you talk about the person that you love that, see, I did it, that survived because a drug
I can't tell if she's upset that I survived because I am here, but she's still debating that. You know, we learned this from hanging out with our friends on the left, because we would always, and I've been to conferences with other libertarians, we always put up a big spreadsheet on the screen in front of us, and there's so many numbers you can't even read them, and people sort of walk through the logic of why governmental healthcare is a dangerous idea, and they always point to that number in the bottom right corner and say, "See, I proved it." And I go hang out with my leftist friends, and they don't do any of that. They don't care about the math. They don't care about the numbers. They don't care about the economics. They tell a story about a mom trying to get healthcare for her daughter. And after a rending 45-minute story about why that person matters so much and why she can't get what she needs, they say, that's why we need to socialize medicine. And that's their argument. I think we need to learn something about how Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and other people that do so well telling emotional, personal stories. That's why Terry talked me into this. And the reason that we're telling you all this is that I want you to tell a story. And I want you to tell a story about your life, about a friend of yours, and connect it to what's happening every day. There is a story that very much personalizes and makes an impassioned, emotional case for liberty. It's there. We just have to get out of our philosophical box. We can't be the kid that I was when I was 17, when I was quoting Murray Rothbard, because not only can't you get dates, you cannot convince anybody with that stuff.
So here we are in day 472 of the lockdown. Things are starting to look a little bit brighter, and everyone's been focusing so much on the negatives. I mean, it's a horrible time everywhere. But there's also some good things happening in spite of the government, I think is the best way to say that. So I'm going to show one more video that we've made during the lockdown, and then we will take questions after this. This video, for once, does not have Matt in it. At some point, I'm going to figure out why I'm never in any of the videos.
Yeah, I officially retired today, and Terry's doing the videos because...
But this video was written and stars one of our team members. He's based out in California, Sam Martin. So we're going to close with this, and then I look forward to hearing your all's questions in a bit. That one. I can screen it ended, and it's at 46 minutes, so.
From the point of view of the media, you think the world is coming to an end when we spend our time locked up in houses, terrified of a virus lurking outside our door. We turn on the news, follow all the rules of our elected officials. They know what to do, right? Give up our rights without a fight. Didn't need those anyways, right? Would rather feel safe than have the space to live my life, go outside, take the kids to the park, go back to work. But I want to tell a different story. When all we hear about is shortage, mask shortage, test shortage, bed shortage, food shortage, cure shortage, we forget about the abundance, the dedication, the intrepid nature of the human spirit to come together under one goal, one flag, one cause. When the regulations and laws are stripped away to allow businesses to innovate, retool, and activate the millions of workers and leaders and humans that want to do good with their skills and creativity, brilliantly shifting their entire business to fit the needs of this crisis. So the media says we have a testing and treatment shortage. There are over 79 companies around the world working together for better solutions and availabilities, shifting industries to meet the world's needs. Alphabet building a website to find nearby testing sites. Credo Diagnostics creating a 20-minute COVID-19 test. Cytodyn and Gilead creating antiviral medications. Collaborations between biotech firms and educational institutions to create RNA interference therapies, and Cellularity creating a potential stem cell therapy. There are more than 50 companies around the world creating vaccines at breakneck speed. Trials already starting in 2020, never before seen in the history of humanity. Clothing companies rearranging their supply chains to create masks and protective equipment for healthcare workers on the front lines. Breweries creating hand sanitizers. IKEA working with suppliers to create masks, aprons, and visors. Printing companies making face shields. Giants in the auto industry field producing hundreds of thousands of ventilators, free of regulators telling them what they can and can't produce. 100,000 people are offering their Airbnbs for free for COVID-19 responders. Uber drivers donating 10 million free rides and deliveries for healthcare workers, senior citizens, and others in need. So is the world really ending? Is everything actually as depressing as they're saying? Are we really as divided as they're making us out to be? Or maybe we're more united than ever. Maybe we can weather any storm together, because when people are free to create and innovate, it activates an unstoppable resilience in the human spirit.
All right, cool. I want to say just one last thing. The artwork that you saw in the Hard Work video and all of the graphics and all these videos are done by Matt Battaglia. Sam is obviously more articulate and better looking than some of our video stars. So we want to see more of that in the future. And we very much aspire to tell beautiful stories that bring people in who are not part of our tribe, who are not part of the liberty movement. We call them the liberty curious, and our hope is we can actually break through the tribal warfare that seems to be just part of our global culture today and connect with people.
All right, and so now questions. Ask us anything.
So we have a question for Matt: digital or vinyl?
Look what I have here. So I'm a huge digital guy. I'm vinyl guy, and I've tragically old enough that I was a vinyl guy the first time around before it became cool again. There's something really special about the sound of vinyl records. Digital, particularly MP3, screws up the sound. I think technology is going to solve that problem, but what it doesn't solve is, this is a bad example, but the thing I always loved about vinyl albums was the liner notes inside. And you would get to know the band, and you would get to understand the lyrics, and you would have some context for what you're listening to. That, of course, is how I discovered ideas in the first place. So if you're interested, yeah, vinyl is cool. It's a cool hobby. It's a cool way to relax and not worry about all the other things around you.
And thank God, one of the things that we accomplished during this lockdown is we finally managed to get Kibbe's new turntable connected to speakers out here. This is the room that we're in is our actual video studio. It's a converted room above our garage. And he has had his turntable and speakers here for probably 9 months. And we finally solved the problem yesterday. So it was getting touch and go, because as the former engineer in the family, it was my job to get it working. He had tried to do it himself, and it turns out that it actually helps to read the instructions, because he had missed one little button and switch, and then it worked.
This shouldn't be about attacking me right now.
I have a follow-up question because it's also a musical question. So I am a rock music nerd myself, to the extent that it burned so much through my brain when you said that you met 1983. I thought that's when Metallica released their first album. And when you said you got married in 86, I thought, oh yeah, Master of Puppets. So I will never forget it ever again. But there is a logical mistake, I think, because I'm a libertarian, but I never really got into Rush. Which album should I start with?
2112.
Well, so everyone mentions 2112.
I was wrong.
This is one of my favorites. If you're into Metallica, Hemispheres is super proggy, but it's also super heavy. And if you go, the further back you go with Rush, the more they're more like a Led Zeppelin power trio. And if you like that hard stuff, I still love the hard guitar-based stuff better. And so if you're into the heavy stuff, go early and go often.
So thank you for that. And then I have another question, which is, we already said that COVID is a pretty tough time for everyone. However, it's also a chance for the libertarian movement. Do you think that after this crisis, after this finally will be over, it will make us as libertarians stronger, or will it make us weaker? Will it make some real problems for the whole ideology?
I mean, it can go both ways. Matt and I are both tend to be optimistic. And so I think that it will bring us together and unite us more so than we have been in the past. I mean, the great saying, right, is never let a crisis go to waste. And what we're seeing right now is politicians in the US, and I know all over the world, taking this opportunity to try to remake their cities and countries into some closer version of the socialist ideal. I think Spain just passed universal basic income. In the US, the mayors are using this opportunity to shut down streets so that it's more pedestrian friendly, all part of the global warming mantra. So we certainly have a lot more things to fight against. And I think that people will really see this as just another amazing government overreach.
So I think we have to make the case, because it's in our country, and I think this is happening in some form or another everywhere. It seems like a legitimate argument about how to best deal with a pandemic that was killing people has devolved into the same tribal warfare that we were having before, where some people don't trust the government and other people trust the government no matter what they say and do. And we're sort of Switzerland in that argument, because I don't think that we're like, screw this, it doesn't matter, it's fake news, it's phony baloney. That's not where we are. We think this is a serious health problem and we think we need to deal with it. We're also not in the camp that very much believes that politics can solve really complex problems. We believe in markets, which is really just a mutual support system by which people struggle in a radically uncertain world to figure out stuff that's going to happen tomorrow. And that's got to be a bottom-up process. I don't think that's a left or right thing. Everyone watching this thinks it's a libertarian thing, but I think it's a human thing. I think people can understand the power of people at a very personal level taking responsibility and solving problems. And as the dust settles and we discover all of the unintended consequences of command and control decisions and all of the human devastation that caused, we should be telling that, not just like, wow, the government sucks. And I do that a lot. I have been doing that a lot. But like, there's a solution, and it involves you and me and our neighbors getting together and rebuilding this mess that they made for us.
So we have a question from YouTube from Dennis. How are you working and what avenues are you pursuing to get videos like the one you produced with Sam Martin out to a larger audience outside libertarians?
I'll take that one. You can add on. So besides being on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, we've expanded into YouTube, which isn't quite as censored, for lack of a better word, to our message. But we're one of the few groups that has expanded beyond social media. We have a channel on Amazon Prime that gets a lot of good traffic to it. And people that are watching our videos on Amazon Prime tend to watch them a lot longer, actually 30% longer than they do when they're watching them on YouTube. We also are on Roku, which is like Hulu. It's another TV streaming. I think we're the only nonprofit that I know of in our space that are there. So we are definitely working outside of the silos. It's not filtered there. People are finding our messaging that way. If we had the budget, we would certainly advertise a lot more on those channels to get the word out. But we also really work hard to make sure that our messages speak to everyone, left or right, conservative, liberal, libertarian. We don't need to speak to the choir. They're already going to church. We want to get the people that don't necessarily ascribe to us. Oh, the other channel was Roku.
Yeah, you said that.
I know, but somebody asked another question.
Okay.
So I was just following up on that question. Roku was the channel that I mentioned.
And by the way, so we sort of have a passionate, burning hatred of clickbait and fear porn and all of this tribal warfare that goes on social media. And that's the sort of stuff that most gets censored by the big tech companies today. So we have not had as many problems, although they still don't allow us to use words like socialism for some reason I don't fully understand. The future is competition and breaking up these monopolies. And we have a pretty bold vision for Free the People, where our website becomes a channel and a community on its own that doesn't really depend on some third party deciding what your experience is going to be. We're also going to be partnering with Dave Rubin. Maybe you guys know who Dave Rubin is. He has a new platform called locals.com, and we're working with them. And I think there's going to be alternatives for all of us that have suffered under the authoritarian algorithm of Facebook and Twitter and these kinds of things.
So another question. It is inspired apparently by a left-wing friend. Lots of my left-wing friends also say they want and are fighting for liberty, freedom, and democracy, which is also what we as liberals want, we as liberals in the European sense. Is there maybe a difference between freedom in our minds and their minds?
You go ahead.
I think there is, and I think one of the libertarian arguments that I hate with a burning passion is about the word democracy, because I think democracy is a cherished word and something. It's like this universal value that all good people sort of believe in democracy because they believe in people solving problems. And I think we should use those words. I think we should steal the word liberal back. And when I use those words a lot, and I use words like community and justice and all of these words that I think have been sort of corrupted in their meaning over time, because when you dig beneath the surface of this language disconnect that we have between left and right and whoever we're with, there is a human value that does connect us underneath. So when I talk about democracy, I always define what I mean by it. Democracy, and I'm not talking about the sort of vulgar, dangerous democracy where 51% of the people get to do whatever they want to 49% of the people. I'm talking about all of us making choices and having more say over our own lives, and markets essentially are radically democratic in that sense. Do you disagree?
No.
Okay. Thank goodness.
So I think there is a follow-up question. Is there like a difference of the meaning of democracy in Switzerland and in ancient Rome?
I'm sure there is, because the word has been corrupted, and a lot of modern Democrats, there's this phrase you all know, democratic socialism, which in my mind is kind of a contradiction. But I think it's because they're not defining socialism in any way like we would think about it, as a very authoritarian, centralized, and brutal way of organizing society. You can't be both democratic and authoritarian at the same time. But the danger for us is this idea, and we could point out the danger, that this vulgar version of democracy, where the people, based on, let's say a third to a half of the public shows up to vote, and 51% of that half of the public decides to take all of your stuff, or to discriminate against people based on the color of their skin. That's not democracy. That's mob rule. That's dangerous. So I think we need to keep defining what we mean by that, but don't give up on the beautiful words. These are words that move people to action. And when you say you're against democracy, people are not hearing what you're saying. They're hearing something else that makes you sound like an authoritarian, and you mean the opposite.
I agree. We should take back the words. This is one of the reasons why when talking to Europeans, I rarely say I'm a libertarian. I say that I'm a consistent liberal.
Yeah. And then define it, right?
Right. Yeah. You have to do this. No other chance, so other people understand. Right. So Dennis has another question. Do you think teaching people the importance of a representative republic is the higher bar over democracy?
I think they're very much related, because when we in the United States talk about our constitutional republic, we should probably talk about the rules of the game, the very definition of justice that says that everybody should be treated just like everybody else under the laws of the land. And that's what constitutional republicanism actually means. Those words have also been corrupted. Like, you can't have democracy unless you have a rule of law that treats everybody just like everybody else under the laws of the land. But all of these terms are loaded and corrupted now. And one of the phrases that we all love to say, for instance, is rule of law. And I am certain that my progressive friends, when they hear that, they think about that cop that killed the guy in Minneapolis. That's what they think. And so if we're going to use our favorite phrases like rule of law, we need to go on and say, I'm talking about justice. I'm talking about the government treating Black people and white people exactly the same. I'm talking about a government that doesn't abuse power. I'm talking about a government that holds that cop to the same standard, a higher standard than the rest of us. And so I think it's the same thing. You gotta connect to those universal human values, instead of just using sort of the political and philosophical jargon that we all, when we're lazy or drunk, we fall into this, and I'm as guilty as anybody else of being lazy and drunk.
It is a lockdown after all.
Yeah. It's cocktail hour somewhere, right?
Well, definitely for you guys.
So I have a question about American politics. I think it won't be controversial in this conversation when I say that both the major parties are horrible. However, the Republicans, at least for the majority of my life, have always been the economically more libertarian option. That has changed. A lot since, well, for the last 5-6 years. And it was already going on before Trump. Trump, I think, was just a symptom. So the Republican Party is becoming this nationalist, protectionist party. And my question would be, what can libertarians do in such a moment when Democrats are becoming more and more leftists, more and more socialists, when Republicans are becoming more socialist and more nationalists? It seems like a situation where there is now possible positive outcome.
Yeah. Well, we talk about this and argue about this every day. And one of the ways that we deal with that, and I less than Terry have a political background. I used to be a community organizer, and I used to work for various candidates, most of whom I'm still proud of. We both.
Well, yeah, I mean, we ran a super PAC in 2016 for Gary Johnson, using that as an opportunity to get the libertarian message out when people were paying attention, because Gary was a more serious candidate than most people, than libertarians nominate in a lot of ways. So it was at a time when the word libertarian, the Google searches for that word were, I forget what the spikes were, but it was crazy. So we were using it as the opportunity to teach people about what limited government is and should be. But that's a little off for your question.
But we're not, Free the People is not even slightly political, and we're an equal opportunity critic of sort of radical left-wing authoritarianism, radical right-wing authoritarianism. I have said nice things about Barack Obama, and I have said nice things about Donald Trump, but generally, because we are libertarians, we're mostly critical of a lot of things they have done to expand the size and scope of government. We try not to join a tribe, and that's very difficult on social media, as you know, because if you criticize Trump about anything, you're immediately tagged as a communist, never Trumper, and all sorts of silly stuff. But I think there's a market opportunity here. Those two tribes that spent all their time identifying essentially by what they hate about the other guys. In the middle, I think there is a swath of people, the liberty curious, particularly young people, that are like, I don't want to fight. I'm tired of just hating on those other guys. I want to live my life. I want to be left alone as long as you don't hurt me or take my stuff. And I think we should view this as a market opportunity to connect with a huge swath of people all across the world that are looking for a new home. And I'm not talking about a political home. I'm not talking about the Libertarian Party. I'm talking about sort of the values that unite us and hold us together. And if we build that community, politics will follow. There will be opportunistic politicians. Maybe they believe it, maybe they don't, but they will represent that market segment of people if that exists.
Yep.
She never agrees with me, only on camera.
Isn't that when it's most important?
Yeah.
So thank you for your kind answers, and thank you for being here with us tonight. It was a pleasure to listen to your talk, to see all those videos, and then to interview you shortly. I was very happy to have you here, and to our guests, I also want to say thank you for being here. And next week, we will have another great guest. We will have Patrick Schumacher, who will tell us something about urbanism after COVID-19. So one of the most famous architects in the world, and an anarcho-capitalist. It will be fun. Another great guest. And thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you so much for having us on a Sunday